So thank you so much for connecting with me. I was listening, I was reading the stuff that you were writing, and I was like, I need to just chat with Chris because one of the things that I'm doing, and I'm recording this by the way, because
Okay.
I am sharing. I'd like to potentially share some of this information out, but I've been trying to connect with a lot of AEC professionals to just kind of talk with them about their experience, especially those that have podcasted and
Yeah.
those that have created content beyond just the norm of not necessarily hiring an outside agency to create a
Yeah.
bunch of stuff based on their brands or based on the projects that they do, but have just said, you know what, I'm going to take the bull by the horns and I'm going to tell my story the way I know how to tell it. And I'm going to use these platforms to do it.
Yep.
And you strike me as somebody that has, you're an amazing architect, but you've also taken the time to kind of pick up some of the tools necessary to utilize some of these other channels to share your message with the world. And of course, that world is the marketplace that you serve as an architect. And
Yep.
so I was hoping to just chat with you a little bit about that and maybe just hopefully give people some breadcrumbs about ways that they could be thinking about utilizing podcasting, whether video or audio. When I say podcasting, I'm
Uh-huh.
just talking about the gamut, right? But
Yeah,
but
like
because a
media
lot
in
of
general. Yeah.
yeah, media in general, because a lot of people are like, oh, instantly like, yeah, I was watching a podcast the other day, and as an audio purist that I am, and a little bit of a snob, I'm like, no, you were watching a video
Yeah.
that is a podcast, but it's totally fine. I mean, you say tomato, I say tomato. The reality is that people are consuming information
Yep.
in a variety of ways these days, and we have to be nimble. We being design people in the design industry, design firms need to be thinking about how they tell their story early and often. And I said something along those lines at the Entre Architect event.
Yeah.
But I mean, you always have to be closing, right? To use a Glenn Ross
Yeah.
reference.
Great movie.
Yeah, it is a great movie. You always have to be closing when it comes to just putting your information out there. You can't be bashful about it. And you strike me as somebody that has just said, you know what, I'm just going to get out there, and people can take me for how they take me, and I'm going to share what my truth is, what my experience has been in this industry, and how I serve the needs of the clients that I serve on a daily basis. Is
Yeah.
that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. And thanks for saying all that. I mean, I just kind of started when I started it as just like trying to like get a little side hustle going on while I was an employee. This is before I even started my firm, and I was like, what can I do, to, I think I had a thought of like designing house plans and then like selling them to local contractors or like marketing them to local contractors rather than doing like a plan site, like one of those big website sort of things. And I was like, well, how can I like supplement that? And I was like, well, if I do a podcast that talks about the questions the clients have, maybe that would be a way to sort of get like some traction on that. That's kind of how it started, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so, it's really easy. And I think like, well, it's not easy to do, but I'm just saying it's easy to sort of create a list of 20 or 50 or even 100 questions that every single client has for every single
Mhm.
project. You're answering the same sort of things over and over again. And so that's just kind of how it started with like, what are those main questions that people have? What can I sort of do to answer that in a more thorough way than I could in just like having a casual conversation where I might say a couple things, but I kind of forget some other things. Right? And
Yep.
like it's a way to like gather your thoughts. And then that way, when you have those conversations with people, you can have the natural conversation, but then also say, hey, if you want to learn more, just go and check this out and send them a link. And so that's really how it started. And then the benefit is like you get people to know you and maybe even to hire you. So that's happened a bunch of times as well. So
Yeah, no, I love that. And I mean, so how long have you been doing your video work which by the way, I might add is actually really good. And I will
thanks.
I will I will make sure I share some links to some of the stuff that you put out. I mean, you've been kind enough to serve people in this space as well as yourself. And even just the nice stuff that you did for Entree Architect before their big annual event or biannual event that they
Yeah.
had recently in Nashville, I thought was excellent. So
Oh, thanks.
when did you start doing this?
So I started doing the audio podcast in March of 2020. So right at the start of COVID.
Okay.
And that's kind of like where I had that. I was still an employee the beginning of March, I was still an employee at the firm that I had worked at for 20 years. And by mid-March, I was out on my own. So, but in the meantime, I had started that podcast then. And then I did podcast only for a couple of years, and I would try to batch record a couple episodes a week, and then I would spend some time on the weekends doing some editing. And I don't edit, I'm not a professional editor, right? So, and I wasn't striving for a professional. I was more striving for get it as good as I can get it and get it out there, right? I think getting it out there is more important, and you can work on polishing it later. And so I did that for 2 years, and then in the meantime, I had written a book, and then was kind of like looking for the next sort of challenge. And I saw I kept on thinking like video would be the next step. And so I already had all that content from the podcast and the book. So I'm like, okay, what if I just turn these into talking, like each little bullet point I can turn into a talking head video and just start simple and see what happens. And so I started that right before the first TCAM. I recorded so that was in 2022, right? And I recorded my first 3 videos like 2 weeks before we went to Austin. And because I had it as a goal, because I was telling people in the Entree Architect community that I was doing it, and I didn't want to show up to TCAM, the first TCAM, and not have it done. So I recorded 3 videos and I released them I don't know, it must have been 2 or 3 days before we flew down to Austin. And then I kind of had to play a little catch up, with projects the rest of that fall, all right. And then starting in really 2023, I became more consistent with it. So really, basically since 2023, I've been doing the video.
Yeah, no, I love that, man. Well,
So like I said, certainly you've done a great job with it, and however we end up sharing this information, I'll be sure to link to some of your videos because
thanks.
I think people would really enjoy them. So my question for you is, and well, actually, let me back up real quick because I think that people listening to this should hear very clearly what you said. You had some content in your book. You had already done some podcasts, so you repurposed that content into little, as we'll call them, vignettes.
Yeah, there you go.
That you did with your video, and I think that's great, and I think a lot of firms, I think they struggle, like design firms specifically, but any business vertical. But we're speaking here about engineering and architectural firms. I think they struggle with the idea that they just don't have enough information to share, and
Yeah.
I don't think that could be further from the truth.
Exactly. They couldn't be more wrong if they think that way. Like even if you just start with the basic premise on what's the 20 questions you get from every client, right? And whether you're an architect or an engineer or a landscape architect or an interior designer, it doesn't have to be these profound sort of revolutionary ideas. It's just what are the things that are you're always answering, or what are the things that you really want the people to know that they don't know? And if you start with those and just make a list, and then from that list you can put a couple, each sort of topic you could easily come up with 5 bullet points and then take those 5 bullet points and make them into little paragraphs, and there you go, you got a podcast. Right?
yeah, I mean, it's totally. I mean, like you said,
Just in saying that, I'm sitting here thinking, 20 things I was afraid to ask my architect. 20 questions, right? And it's like you can literally go down the list and create a 5-minute recording for each one. And all of a sudden you've got 20 little mini episodes. And then you're saying, well, Randy, who's going to listen to that? You'd be surprised how many people will go down a rabbit hole listening to that. They could check it out through a YouTube short. You could put it on Instagram Reels. You could literally record it as audio and put it out as a mini podcast episode, and brand it to your agency. I mean, there's a million different ways. I'm always in my head thinking about different ways that a firm can set themselves apart. But you're absolutely right. When people think, "Oh, I have no content," you absolutely do. And if you just start with outside of your origin story, right, which I think
Yeah.
is important, like even your story is like really important. Like, how do you tell that? Because I think, well, why should I work with Chris? What's so special about Chris? Well, here's what Chris did. That when he pivoted and had to make a change, to step out on his own during the pandemic, he also introduced this whole new area of his business to be able to, help people understand just the role of architecture and why the importance of architectural design within the framework of his services. And so, there's just so much that you can talk about. And
Yeah.
I think people are sometimes, and what's crazy to me is that as a design professional, as an architect, you are, what's the first three letters of your title? You are an art. There's art, right? Art,
Yep.
art is part of it. And so, and I know that art is, it's spelled ART, but ART
Yeah.
is in there. And so the reality is that there is a level of creativity that design professionals have that they don't always lean into, especially when it comes to promoting themselves, because that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and it doesn't even have to be like traditional promotion. Like I think even teaching, right? Teaching the clients the things that they don't know is a great way to promote yourself without like coming off as too salesy, right? Because a lot of people like don't want to like, oh, I'm going to sound like a salesperson, right? It's like, well, you're in business, right? You got to sell your services or your product somehow, right? But if you
Yeah.
come out, if you're like teaching and explaining, like clients latch onto that and they appreciate it, and it can lead to work. It's a long game, right? But it can lead to projects.
Yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of a long game,
Is so, like, I've always given the example when I originally created, when I was working at Zweig Group, which
Yep.
is a management consulting firm which serves the design industry. When I worked at Zweig Group, I created the Zweig Letter podcast for a
Yep.
couple of reasons. The first reason was simply to just promote the newsletter. Like, hey, it's a weekly newsletter. It's been running since 92. You need to subscribe to it because it's a great way to stay on top of industry information and best practices for design professionals. Okay. But what I found was that it became a great calling card for people that wanted to work with Zweig,
Yeah.
because all of a sudden they became aware that, oh, I had no idea that you did ownership transition. I had no idea that you did strategic planning. I had no idea that you had a marketing apparatus. I had, and it just goes on and on. And so, have you found in the short period of time, these last couple of years that you've been creating content, that people have come to you and said, "Oh, Chris, I had no idea you did fill in the blank." Have you had that experience?
Not necessarily in that capacity, but I have landed several projects from doing this stuff. And so it's more of just like people finding you, right? Rather than like, maybe if I did something, if I did an episode that of a service that I provide that isn't part of standard practice, maybe there would be some of that. But for me, it's really been about just a way for people to find me, right?
Yeah.
I've had, 3 or 4 projects of people that found me by listening to the podcast, and I've had, several projects of people who found me by watching the videos, including one where I just signed a contract on a $2 million home 2 days ago, right? And they found me. These people live 20 minutes away from me, but they found me on the YouTube videos, right? So it's more of that. It's more of a great way to find you because, like, of course, podcasts is you can find people by podcast, but like when you talk about the video, like, YouTube is one of the most highly used search engines, and
it's
so number two,
Right?
yep,
It flip flops between 1 and 2 when you think about it. And I look at even how I use YouTube, and I'm constantly like right now in this season, I'm constantly on the hunt to learn all I can about artificial intelligence and how it's going to impact me, because I'm trying to stay awake and know how this technology is going to impact me, especially within the context of my personal life and my professional life. And so I think what you said is very important. It's about awareness and about kind of creating your brand and putting it out in as many places as you can, because you just never know who's listening. And YouTube shorts are easy. They're super consumable. Getting back to that idea that you had about the top 20 questions, you could put those out in YouTube shorts and just go on and on and on with them. And if you tag them and title them properly, you'd be surprised how quickly you'll come up, and Google and YouTube will serve you videos. Especially what I have found is that they serve a lot of videos to me of things that are actually in the region or area that I'm in too. So there's that,
what's even better too. What's even better, and this isn't a new concept or whatever, but if you write that list of 20 things that you could have the long form content where it's a longer video, maybe it's a 10-minute long video with the audio extracted into a podcast with the transcription extracted to a blog. And so there you have audio, podcast, video, blog, all by one piece of content. And then you take each one of those 20 points is its own little short, right? That gets put on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok if you want it to, and you can even take those each individual little point and make an image out of it and make an Instagram and Facebook post that's an image. And it's endless, right? You're just reusing the content and making it simple and repeatable, I think is the key.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I would have to ask you this, because of course everybody's thinking about this. How has AI helped your workflow as you're thinking about developing content? Because again, like I said, you still are a practicing architect. You work, you design and you build things. And so how does AI help you in that workflow of getting some of the content out that you want to share with the world?
So what I've been doing, and I got to experiment with this more, but what I've been doing is I'll take those initial ideas and I'll run it through the AI, and I'll say, I like what are 20 things that you're afraid to ask your architect, right? And I'll I have my list, but then I'll ask ChatGPT, the same thing and see what they come up with. And then, or if I'm writing a video, if I'm doing a script for a video, I'll put what I want to accomplish, and I'll say write a 5-minute long video script, and then I'll take what the AI comes up with and compare it to what I was thinking and maybe make some adjustments. And then from there, I'll just like reorganize and create like a new bullet point list, just so you're not so it doesn't look like you're reading off of something.
Right. And that's how you refine it.
That's simply the best way to do it. And so I certainly encourage people to kind of play with artificial intelligence, or AI, as the cool kids say, as they're trying to figure some of these things out. And actually, you'd be surprised with all of the work that has gone into building OpenAI and some of the other LLMs. There's a lot of information about you already out there. So, you can really determine, you can ask it certain questions that it's going to answer you, and don't be surprised by the veracity and the quality of the information that you'll find. So I think it's certainly something worth considering. So
the other thing I've used AI for is I've taken longer segments and said break it up into clips, and it will automatically break it up into clips. So there's some editing and some things that you have to do to make it perfect, because sometimes it will end like mid-sentence, right? But it's a good way, like if you have a longer piece of content and you want to break it up into those individual clips, that's a good way to go about it.
And that's what a lot of tools that are out there that are available,
right, that people can use, like Headliner and others, that actually they have AI algorithms within them that allow them to break up the content and then give it to you. You could say, hey, I want
I want 8 reels that are
Yep.
1 minute long that talk about a certain
idea. And so I think it's one of those things that, is certainly
easy to do. And I encourage people to really just get out there and test it out.
out and see what they can come up with. So
So what are you bullish about?
in this space as it pertains to just, sharing out content in terms of the work that you're doing, and what are you excited about for the future as you look at 2025 and beyond?
Well, for me, for the content that I'm producing, what I want to show more of, and this takes more time, which is why it's harder, but what I want to show more of is more behind the scenes of what it's like to design a custom home or design a building. And I've done that a little bit in the past, but that's really, for me, that's what gets the most traction. Is
Yeah.
is when I can show the design process, right? Rather than just showing the end product.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to try to do more of that this year. And then also one of the things I always, it's been a little while since I've done this, but more interviews with product and material reps. Like I just had a coffee meeting today with this amazing window manufacturer, and it's like I need to, I want to interview him because I want to be able to talk to my clients and my future clients about this product. And then instead of just me rambling on, I'll say, hey, there's these great windows. They're, German made, and they're any type of wood species that you want. And they're, much more energy efficient than a Marvin or a Pella window. Here, go listen to this interview. Right. And so it's a great way to sort of talk to your clients about all these different things that they can do with their buildings or their homes. And they can do it, they can consume it at their own pace too, right? Because you're not just gonna overload them with information and say make a decision, right? You could say here's some information and here's an interview with the product rep, and you can go and listen to it.
Yeah. No, I love that. And that's a perfect example of,
To me, the value of creating content, right? Because it just gives you and affords you an opportunity. And I'll take it even one step further. You could easily, ask
current and past clients
to interview them about
Yep.
their experience with your design aesthetic and your design work and portfolio. And that serves to continue to give the general public a little bit of a window into who you are as an architect and as a designer. And I tell this to firms all the time, one of the surefire ways to connect with people that have said no, or organizations or companies that you've answered an RFP for that have ultimately turned you down or declined, just invite them on your program and talk about the work that they do and why what design means to them. And no one's ever going to say no, right? Because everybody, and you probably heard me say this, everybody loves to tune into that station WIFM. What's in it for me? And that's just the way that it is. So it's very rare when somebody says, "Oh, I don't want to talk about myself." Oh, wait, hold on, you have a podcast? Where's
Exactly.
the mic? Okay, hold on. And then they go to town. And so it just gives you another window into that. And actually, I've done that with SWI Group several times, where we have interviewed people that had said no to a proposal that they sent out, and then eventually they ended up doing work with them. And sometimes it's the long game, right? And design professionals are not, you guys are not, here one day and gone the next. I mean, you guys are. When I think about design professionals, I think of sometimes I can see a 70 or an 80-year-old architect, which I know of some that are still practicing at a high level.
Yeah, I do too.
That are still rainmakers in their firms. And so, people that, engineers and architects, their practices can be a long time, of course. And I think that's something to be considered, that, you have to do all that you can to control the narrative and to talk about your brand. And so I think it's important for firms to be thinking proactively about it. You can't just stick up a website anymore. Honestly, websites are nowhere near as valuable as they used to be, because people just aren't looking at them. Now it's just window dressing. It's just nice to have, and it's great to have some basic information that people can find. But if you're listed in a directory or in a really well-placed industry publication that talks about your business. I mean, that stuff ends up being found in searches better than your websites do sometimes.
Definitely. But I think with a website too, it has to be a continuation of that story, right? If people find you through whatever content, whether it's a blog, a podcast, a video, an Instagram post, and then they go to your website, and if the website is just about, hey, look at us on our awards and here's a portfolio of our projects, then they're not really going to connect with it. You have to have whatever sort of language that you're using to tell your story. You have to continue that on the website. But I also wanted to before we get too far away from it, I wanted to circle back to what you just said about interviewing people that you might have had an RFP that you didn't land the project. You could even do that with, and I've experimented with this a little bit in the past, but it could be something that I do in the future again. But that content-based networking, right? If like, let's say if you're an architect and you want to do more fire stations, like I love designing fire stations, or maybe you don't have any experience designing a fire station. Well, create a podcast, interview fire chiefs, interview fire apparatus manufacturers, interview engineers that design fire stations, interview the people that make the doors that, the overhead doors. You network with the people that you want to do work with, but you create the content around that, which makes you appear to be the expert, and at the same time it gives you a foot in the door to the people who are doing that work. So if you're out there, if you're an architect or an engineer and you don't have experience in a certain market sector and you want to do more of that, well, then create content around it and interview the people that do it.
Yeah, well, and that's a perfect example of what a company called ARCAT did with the detailed podcast.
Yep.
They have like, I want to say like 75 brands that work with them, and they basically interviewed all of them and then some. They have an amazing interviewer in Sharice Lakeside, but they have basically they've created a platform and then elevated everybody else's brand and shared it out on their platform. And talked about what they offer. And it's the ultimate, Gary Vaynerchuk talks about the rope-a-dope and the, jab, 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 right hook. It's the ultimate right hook. And that's what you have to be thinking about. You're just constantly out there jabbing. You're constantly out there just sharing really good content. And every now and then you'll have an ask, and that's the right hook. And you don't have to be too, hardcore about it. And I think what you'll find, especially in this space as design professionals, I would think most design professionals would gravitate towards that method or style of marketing, because it's not over the top, it's not in your face, and you don't feel like a cheap salesman. You feel like somebody that is you understand your industry, you understand the work that you do and the value that you bring to the market, and you want to share that with as many people as will listen.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree.
Man, listen,
that's all I really wanted to talk with you about. I wanted to just share that, and honestly, I mean, people listening to this, just for perfect transparency, I mean, Chris, you can tell anybody, did we plan anything that we talked about? It was
absolutely not.
I sent you a message just said, hey man, let's just get on and talk.
Let's talk. Yeah.
Granted, both you and I create a lot of content, so just kind of talking off the cuff gets easier and easier as you do it. It's like a muscle. The more I lift that muscle, the stronger I get. And you got to put your reps in. But I say all that to say that it doesn't take much to create good content. What it does take is just a little bit of time and thought. And honestly, all I wanted to do is just have a conversation with Chris to highlight some of the cool things that he's been doing. Now, is that something he can talk about? Of course, because he's living it on a daily basis. So that was the whole purpose of, just getting together and sharing that with those that would be have a chance to listen to this particular conversation. Chris, for anybody that happens to see this video, if they want to reach out to you and just ask you some questions or, maybe follow you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Sure. They can reach me at email Chris at n3architecture.com. You can go to the website n3architecture.com, or YouTube is N3 Architecture. And the podcast is Home Design Academy, is the podcast. But really quick too, Randy, really quick. I just want to say too, it like in terms of getting started, like it doesn't have to be perfect, right?
Yeah.
You don't need to invest money in expensive equipment. I mean, the first, I think 10 episodes of my podcast, I held up my cell phone and talked into my cell phone. The voice recorder. One of the episodes, I think it was like my third episode or so. I published it, and 6 months later, someone asked me a question like, "Oh, at 5 minutes and 32 seconds, you said this. Can you expand on that?" They sent me an email. So I'm like, okay, I can't remember what I said at 5 minutes. So I went and re-listened to it, and I accidentally had posted an unedited version of that episode, which I recorded. And this was my kids were a little bit younger at the time. They're all teenagers now, but they were a little bit younger at the time. And it was, I think, like, dinner time, or like right after dinner time. So I went down into my basement. I was sick, and I was talking into my cell phone, and I posted the unedited version. And there's like these like 20 or 30-second long pauses, and I said the same sentence over and over again, kind of like trying to like reformulate it better. And I had posted that unedited version, and I think like 10,000 people listened to it. Right? It was like ridiculous. It's like you don't need. It's just proof that you don't need to be perfect, right? Just get a microphone, get a camera. You have your cell phone, right? That's probably better than most people started with 10 years ago, and just record, right? Doesn't have to be perfect.
Yeah.
Start simple.
Yeah. Just record, and
I'd say just ship it, right? Because I mean, great is the enemy of good, and in most cases,
good is enough to get the point across.
That's all we're saying, right? We're not suggesting that you only just want to be a good architect. No, you're a great architect, and you put a lot of time and effort into that. But when it comes to creating this content, I mean, first of all, you're not, what's the guy's name that created The Godfather? You're not, oh my gosh,
it's not Francis Ford Coppola, right?
You're not Francis Ford Coppola. Thank you.
My mind escapes me now. So I mean, or George Lucas, or any of those.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're trying to do is get some information out there. You'll continue to iterate and refine, and it will get better, and you'll sound perfect. And I'm sure somebody might be watching this and be like, "Well, Randy, you sound excellent." It's like, yeah, I've been doing this for a long time. It's easy for me to get up and just talk for an hour without off the cuff. But I mean, you will develop an ability to just really get the word out there, and it won't be as hard as you think. So
I gotta say that my most popular YouTube video by far is the worst video I ever recorded. I think it's awful. It's like I'm not. I mean, I have like clear points, but I'm not making any connection between the two. There's zero storytelling at all. It's just kind of like rambling, right? And then when I edited it, I had this idea like, oh, if I put background music across the whole thing, it would sound cooler. But no, and I had the background music so loud, and it's like people like comment like day after day, like your background music's too loud, like whatever. Like I wanted to listen, but guess what? Guess how many projects that awful video has landed me? 3 projects, three custom homes, one of them being a $5 million home in Louisiana, right? So
it is not.
It's not rocket science. I just want people to hear that, and if you need to go back and rewind what Chris just said, it's not as difficult as you think. Just start working on it. Now there are ways for you if you want to put it out a certain way, you want to just a certain level of professionalism with your content. Absolutely, there are many companies out there that can help you with that. But for the average person, the average design professional, you just need to get started and then start iterating from there and go from there. Because everybody's not going to be able to be Chris, but some of you don't want to be Chris. Some of you just want what Chris has, which is his brand is out there, and it's even beyond him now, right? Because what does Jeff Bezos say, that your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room?
Yep.
That's what your brand is. And so, that's you need to be constantly out there priming the pump and getting information out so that people can learn about you and the amazing things you do in the design industry space. So, man, Chris, I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day to just chat with me about this, and I really, really thank you for that. And for anybody watching this video, just look down in the description or down in the information there, and I'll put the information on how to reach out to Chris or how to connect with me. If you need help, like real help, and you're like, hey, our company has a lot of information, a lot of moving parts, we want something put together, definitely see me. And I have several options for you in terms of just helping you get your content out there to the widest audience possible. And I'm happy to talk with you about that. Just a simple exploratory call. But even without that, if you just have a question, I'm happy to answer that. I'm sure Chris is as well. So
Yeah.
anytime. Again, we'll make sure that his information's at the bottom of this video. You can reach out to him. You can reach out to me. Just ask whatever questions you have. But Chris Novelli, thank you so much, man, for chatting with me today. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you, Randy. It's been fun.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, folks, I will catch up with you
soon. I hope you liked that. Just a quick impromptu conversation with a good friend that's doing some amazing creative work here in the design industry space, especially around podcasting and what that means. So, just take it for what it's worth. And again, if you have any questions, reach out, and however we can help you, we'll be more than happy to do that. We'll chat soon. Peace.
Great. Thanks.